And now we will give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, first of all, the permanent representative of Sweden, please accept our deep condolences on the tragedy that took place in Stockholm. On the night of the 7th of April, the United States attacked the territory of sovereign Syria. We describe that attack as a flagrant violation of international law and an act of aggression. We strongly condemn the illegitimate actions by the U.S. The consequences of this for regional and international stability could be extremely serious. This attack was a flagrant violation of the 2015 memorandum on preventing incidents and ensuring security during air operations in Syrian airspace, and the Ministry of Defense of Russia has stopped its cooperation with Pentagon under that memorandum. Over recent times, the United States administration has often talked about the need to combat international terrorism, and this justified American troops and their allies being present on Syrian territory, although they were there without the invitation of the legitimate government of Syria and without the approval of the Security Council of the United Nations, manipulating articles of the United Nations Charter beyond any criticism. The aggression by the U.S. has only facilitated the strengthening of terrorism. The attack came against Syrian armed forces infrastructure and its air force. That is, against those who over all these years have been combating terrorism. It's not difficult to imagine how much the spirits of these terrorists have been raised after this support from Washington. Immediately after the attack, there were massive attacks by ISIL and al-Nusra against Syrian military sites. Once again, we repeat, and once again, we repeat that the Syrian armed forces will and will continue to be the main anti-terrorist institute of the Syrian Arab Republic. Who will fight against terrorism? These illegal armed groups who have come to Syria in hundreds of thousands? You've destroyed Iraqi military institute, Libyan military bases, and see what's happened. In fact, these actions contradict international decisions, including the Geneva Communique, which we designed together with you, and there it says, it talks about settlement while maintaining national institutions. Is that the sort of national institutions that you are supporting? The Russian Federation, from the United Nations organization, has stated the need to establish an international coalition to counteract terrorism, which would be on the basis of international law. And on many occasions, we've sent signals to Washington of our readiness to undertake such cooperation. As we see it, you have chosen a different path. We must recall, when you take your own path, that this leads to horrible tragedies for countries in the region and the people living there. Think of the consequences. Remember that what you have produced in the Middle East. Think of your steps and how they have impacted on the political settlement process in Syria. Now, today's appeal to move forward the political process, they are hypocritical after this military attack, unfortunately. Now, on the Astana and Geneva tracks, over recent days, there have been clear progress. Now, what aims guided you when you undermined this progress. And the progress that was achieved was not thanks to you at all. Now, returning to the history of chemical weapons. Now, in Syria, the US and the UK and France came up with a draft resolution. It was greatly erroneous in its very logic. It was based on predetermining Damascus being guilty. But where's your principle of assuming innocence? Why don't your capitals recall this in Middle East and in other regions? Why do you forget the presumption of innocence in these cases? Now, all this is taking place because Washington, London, and Paris, I spoke about this in close consultation, and I say this again, have this paranoid idea of overthrowing the legitimate government in sovereign Syria. And this was clearly shown by the non-diplomatic actions and the statements made by the UK Perm Rep. Mr. Rycroft, stop putting forward these unprofessional arguments and accusations against my country. These are not diplomatic. They are lies. Once again, I warn, don't even try to get into fights with in the Arab world. Nothing will work, and nothing will be achieved. That's why you're getting annoyed. All Arab countries recall your colonial hypocrisy. Now, the Ambassador Rycroft, in his statement, talked about issues, and I'd like to recall exactly what has happened. Now, those who undertook this attack are in no way interested in an impartial investigation by a competent international authority to find out exactly what took place in Han Shai-kun. And I will say even more. You are afraid of such an investigation. You are afraid of a real, genuine, independent investigation. What would happen if the outcome of this investigation would contradict your anti-government paradigm? You would be afraid of investigations of what took place in other places. Now, Han Shai-kun, the permanent representative of the USA, said that there is witness from the intelligence services of the USA that the government forces use chemical weapons. And we said, show us. Specialists will see whether this is the case or not. But we will recall that General Power, I believe in this very room, he talked about chemical weapons which were not found. Let's work either with professionals or just work with ultimatums. We're living in a very complex and multipolar world. It's difficult to live in this world. But Russia has proposed to its partners on the Security Council constructive alternative. But you had nothing to accept. There was no professional alternative. You didn't put forward any good arguments to us. And specifically, our initiative was based on the appeal for specialists on a geographical basis, and the OPCW fact-finding mechanism, and the OPCW-UN investigation mission for chemical weapons in Syria, to call that group together on our initiative and to visit the site where this incident took place in Han Shai-kun, and the neighboring areas to conduct professional investigation. Now, all Syrian parties were asked to give immediate access to where the events took place. It's not irrelevant to recall that the Syrian government does not control this area of Idlib province. There are battle-hardened groups from outside who are closely related to terrorist groups of Nursa. And they have things to hide, including in the context of the chemical dossier. But you're trying to hide this again. Again, as you showed in Aleppo. But when Aleppo was freed, everything became clear. It's no coincidence that the complaints against Syria of chemical weapons and their storage by extremists in special warehouses, and they're being used by the army and civilians, has just been ignored, or it's been studied for month after month without any outcome. The OPCW, the fact-finding mission, does not work in a conscientious manner. They prefer to come up with statements of opposition groups, internet blogs, social networks, and a whole range of NGOs of a very doubtful reputation. And they work with information and evidence from the areas where the events took place. They don't even look at that evidence. And they want us to agree with this information? It's not even worth looking at. Now, in our draft, we also set out the need to establish a balanced, in geographical terms, staffing of the investigation group. It's an important point, and it has a direct relationship to the issue of impartiality and trust. So far, the fact-finding mission experts have been made up of group representatives from one country who are in the forefront of the anti-Damascus parties. Now, proof of the blatant double standards is the ignoring of the chemical attack carried out by terrorists in the Middle East as a whole. Recall the recent events in Mosul, in Iraq. What is the international community's reaction? Where was your warning? First and foremost, to those who are establishing this headline action in Han Shaikun. Are these victims of a different category? Second-class victims? Why do we not see in the headlines of your newspapers the tragedy in this besieged town of Mosul? And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. Therefore, the attack in Syria is an attempt to distract attention from the many victims amongst the peaceful population in Iraq and Syria caused by unilateral actions. And they are attacking homes and civilian targets. So humanitarian corridors make no sense. Let's recall the little girl, Havra. She lived in Mosul. You didn't say absolutely any word about this little girl who became a symbol of this tragedy. And when a coalition bomb fell on her house, everybody around her was killed. Thank God, the girl remained alive, but her life had to be fought for. Now her life is out of danger, but she's almost blind. We will not, in this room, set up a cynical show and hold up photographs, but the Mosul tragedy must be publicized. People must know about it. Nothing is said about Mosul. And we do not want, when we talk about Mosul, draw attention from Syria. Those who know our position on this, we know that this is a lie. We do not wish to draw attention of anybody from anything, particularly what terrorists are doing. We just merely want to tell you that if we are fighting terrorism, let's do it on standards. war principles or any other principles, or don't try, let me once again, to argue with ourselves on Iraq. You will not get us involved in that. Look at what you are doing in Iraq and what we are doing. The 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council did attempt to find a compromise last evening on the consultations which we called for. They thanked the American delegation for the fact that a vote had been postponed, but there was nothing to thank them for. Our colleagues didn't even imagine that the decision was made with totally different ideas in mind. It was not with the idea of continuing constructive dialogue. Washington had already chosen to take military action, which was undertaken when members of the Security Council had hardly left the UN building. We call upon the United States to immediately cease its aggression and to join those efforts being made for a political settlement in Syria and to work together to combat the terrorist threat. In that sort of cooperation, we are ready to undertake such cooperation. Today, many insulting words have been heard with regard to our right to veto, our right, which we have used in a responsible manner, but we use it only in such circumstances when you try in the Security Council to impose your irresponsible geopolitical project. The Security Council must develop agreed international decisions. But these geopolitical adventures will never be supported. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the representative of the Russian Federation. And now we will give the floor to the representative of Senegal.
Madam President, I wanted to express my deepest condolences through our colleague Olaf to the people and government